Hey, everybody, welcome back to Reasonably Happy. I am Paul Ollinger. I am AI curious. Are you? Well, I've got a great place to start, and that's my conversation with this week's guest, Bryan Reimer. Bryan is a research scientist at the MIT Center for Transportation and Logistics and at the MIT AgeLab. With over 2 decades of experience in human-centered technology research, he has become a leading voice in the future of mobility. That means autonomous cars and things like that, and making AI systems more practical, accessible, and beneficial for everyday use. He is the co-author of How to Make AI Useful, in which he explores the power and potential of artificial intelligence and how it might change our world. Now, if you, like me, are almost a little bit too intimidated and don't know where to start in your AI conversation, I know you'll get a lot out of this conversation. Please welcome and enjoy this conversation with Bryan Reimer. You're never going to be perfectly happy all the time. The best you can hope for is to be reasonably happy. Reasonably happy. Most of the time. And so how long did you live in Boston?
I was in the Boston area for 16, 17 years. COVID drove me to my ski condo, and I'm one of the few that have said, no, they'll city lifestyle. I'm not going back there.
You're not going back, but you still do you teach remotely at MIT or work
I lead
remotely, or what? How does that work?
I lead a research team, and I try to keep my in-person meetings to a day a week, every day a week, every other week. My world has been remote. I work globally, so I've been on, before Zoom, it was WebEx for years. I used to go to, if you look back, I used to drive and commute, spending an hour or more in the day and into a car to go sit and look at a screen anyway. Yes, I was in an office, and yes, there was coffee always there. And yeah, there's value in having collaborators at your fingertips, but not for the work-life balance.
Did you get into AI through your work on the engineering of the automobile, or was that so much a part of it that you became an AI expert?
No. Yes and no. So my background in AI starts in graduate school 25 years ago, where many of the techniques we talk about today, in their closer to the infancy, we were applying to problems that were non-solvable at that point in time using mathematical approaches. And yeah, as I began to spend more and more time on automated vehicles, you begin to see that there's really a high degree of overlap between AI and our pursuit of autonomy. And automated vehicles are predicated on the advancement of AI, and I see our steps today in large language models and chatbots following the mistakes that we've made over the last decade or so with highly automated vehicles. Yes, AI and automation will solve lots of complex problems, but the transformational stages, it's much more, conceptually efficient to begin thinking about how the AI supports us. And the wet computer, the brain between our ears, has an innate ability to reason in the gray. Machine intelligence is really good at black and white. So we look at automated vehicles, lots of AI, but I'm really a fan of driver assistance systems leaving us in the driver's seat for the foreseeable future, where automation and the ability to automate everything will take over the long haul. What is that? Decades ahead.
So this book seems to be an attempt to put AI into perspective, to talk about where it is today, what it can do for us, to try to cut through the hype and the hysteria, to say, this is what it is, this is what's good, this is what it's good at, this is what it's not so good at, and this is what the future might look like. I want to put it in perspective to a certain degree. So in our lifetimes, let's say the past 50 years or so, the most important technological innovations have been the personal computer, the internet, and mobile phones. I'm not saying that's an exhaustive list, but these are technologies that changed our world within our lifetimes. Where does AI fit into that in terms of its potential impact?
So that's a great question, and I'd like to say that it's probably bigger than those three things alone, but one that will take longer to unfold. I think AI is a technology or tool set. It's not a tool; it's a set of tools. Is as transformative as electricity.
Wow.
But unlike electricity, the smartphone, the personal computer, its true potential is going to take decades to unfold. But when we look back 100 years from now, when we look at where we are today and the transformation of machine intelligence embodied through artificial intelligence, we're going to look at technologies that are built upon many of the tools that the handheld devices and the personal computers you talk about, but the fundamentals are as transformative as electric. It will change how we live. It will change what we do. And if shaped correctly, can be all for the positive. If we use it to automate away the human experience, yeah, we look into a world where our value proposition decreases. If we look to amplify the human experience, we look to a world where our productivity is amplified through these technologies. And that's the world that I really think we need to be looking for.
Well, who decides that? I mean,
well, that's a really important question.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about in the book very interestingly which societies are best positioned to take advantage of AI or to really invest in and scale AI. Can you break those down a little bit to kind of give us some more political, regulatory, capital availability perspective on how all those things interact?
Yeah, Paul, let me start with that who really decides. Unfortunately, it's not the consumer. It's not the small business. It's large tech and public policy. Public policy is probably the unwritten regulatory force that is either going to accelerate or stall the deployment of these technologies over the long haul. Regulators fear change. It's easy to say stop. It's easy to say no. It's harder to say go. But when we look across the globe, let's take three different continents / countries to bed here. We have Europe, the United States, and China. Europe tends to be a little more pro-regulation, a little more careful in its decision making, limited in capital. EU regulations on privacy and AI are already curtailing use cases. The ability to share data, the ability to disclose that, the ability to manage data are limiting the potential of AI already here today in Europe. In the US, where there is an enormous amount of capital, there is a lot of political risk. We looked at whether you're a fan of the red aisle or the blue aisle, we are looking at a pendulum that flips back and forth between the two of them and the associated regulatory perspectives of both. In essence, we can't pick a direction and stick with it. We are being guided by a few very large technology companies that are trying to shape the AI landscape for corporate advantage.
You mentioned Google, Microsoft, and Meta are investing $200 billion into AI infrastructure right now. Is that in the aggregate, 200 billion or each?
That's aggregate.
Okay, but that's a massive amount of capital.
And that was when the book was written some time ago here. I mean, that just keeps increasing at this point. We look at the amount of capital being poured in here, it's humongous. What is really critical in the Western world right now is that if you read the tea leaves in the news, everybody is asking, what is the return on investment for these capital allocations? It doesn't appear clear yet how Meta, Microsoft, Google, or OpenAI are going to see revenue that offsets the capital expenditures. The recent deal between Apple and Alphabet or Google, for the use of Gemini and Apple products is a really interesting one, because here we have Apple now, providing some substantive lift to Alphabet's investments. But before we go on, and Paul, I think it's important we touch base on really the third pillar here. It's China, where you have more of an authoritarian leadership looking for cementing both capital investments and societal benefits. Now, whether we agree with those societal benefits or not, what is clear is that the Chinese economy is willing, and Chinese leadership is willing to set a direction and stick with it. For better or for worse, the Chinese auto industry's rise over the last decade or more is because the Chinese government said, we are going to make an impact globally here, and we are going to stick with that.
They have the ability, they have the will to determine where it goes, and they don't have Bernie Sanders type people in the provinces saying, no, we need to slow the roll here.
Bingo. Or more importantly, even if Bernie Sanders' voice is there, you don't have a regulatory flip-flop between the red and the blue side occurring every 4 or so years.
Right,
So the current investments in the US, based upon the political tea leaves of today, may change all in 3 years from now.
right.
So we have an inability to pick a direction and stick with it for long enough to see the benefit of that direction. Electric vehicles are a great example. Not really a huge fan of the Biden era acceleration of electrification. I think it needed to be a much slower process as the infrastructure evolved. But by golly, we did it. Now we're stepping back in a different direction from that, as electrification is a key piece of a diversified powertrain over the future. Stepping back is not in the U.S. Consumers' best interest. Now, modulating the acceleration, maybe, but stepping completely back is not where we need to go.
Okay, so between China, Europe, and the United States, you've got three different examples of approaches to investing or throttling technology. Europe has a much slower growth rate economically than either China or the United States. So what's the price you pay for losing the AI race?
Humongously. And that's the scary part. But we're racing against, it's U.S. versus China here to me. We are racing against a culture that is willing to set a target and stick with it. So I think that if we look to our political leadership here in the U.S., I'm not saying that we need very detailed red tape built around the AI infrastructure, but we need reasonable guardrails that we cultivate and build the trust in this technology over the next several decades. So how do we balance each of these competitive interests that are investing fortunes with the need to move the populace along in an era where we need to feel AI is here to support us as opposed to AI is here, much like the Terminator, to replace us?
Right. So the concerns about AI are, well, there's at least two that come to mind really easily. First of all, employment numbers, and second, electricity. Let's talk about electricity. The amount of power that these data centers demand is on a scale that we've never contemplated before, to the point where we're taking 3 Mile Island back online to provide electricity here. The fear is that the demand outpaces the supply to the point where price skyrockets for the individual consumer. How do we assure that's not going to happen?
So, Paul, I think the first this is the less of my two worries, because I think the algorithms are going to continue to get more efficient. The data centers are going to get more efficient, and we can continue to ramp up our generation of clean electric. So I think this is an area that we can solve and we can manage, but we need to invest appropriately. And quite frankly, much like many of these organizations are investing in data centers, we need to be thinking about investing in clean data centers. And we can do that. That's a solvable economical decision point. So when we look at the energy side of this, I think that is an area that we can solve in the years ahead. The employment side is the interesting one. I think that many organizations out there, given the geopolitical politics throughout the country and by and large the world, are blaming AI on job cuts in areas where there are a number of other fundamentals there that are guiding why companies may want to cut back. AI and technology is an easy blame game on why, Amazon, for instance, laid off several tens of thousands of individuals back in October. But I think there's organizations and lots of case studies out there. There's one popular from IBM where the layoff was there, and then they realized the human capital was really the point that was needed. So I think if we begin to look at AI as an augmenter of our team's skill set, really treating AI as a co-pilot, not as an autopilot, using it to assist decision-making, not replacing judgment, we can actually enhance the workforce along the way. But this is going to require guardrails and corporate shifts in corporate culture from the automate philosophies. When we think about it in the context of driving, where a lot of my background comes from, this is focusing down on driver assistance versus full automation. That is not to say full automation doesn't win over the long haul, but for now, it's all about assisting us and making us better drivers, better decision makers, better consumers at large.
So let's talk about that through the lens of radiology. You often hear about, hey, radiologists are going to be completely displaced by AI, but you make the argument that it's the collaboration between the technology and the professional that will actually improve radiology for everyone.
And I don't think in this case, it's not a will. Computer vision, really, some of the predecessors to what we see as modern AI today, have been augmenting the reading of imagery in hospital setting in medical for years. Lots of broken bones are completely diagnosed by AI, helping the front end clinician make decisions really quickly. But as countless papers have shown, the art, medicine is a balance between an art and a science. The art and the skill of human radiologists is finding things that the computers have missed. So it is the balancing of the two that has really enhanced what we see as modern radiology. We think about the medicine and we remember that it's the art blended with the science that's got us to where we are today. It is not that medicine is all technology. It is, a combination of clinical judgment mixed with a lot of modern testing and technology that has really transcended what medicine is from where it was decades ago.
So
the same is true on the AI side.
So technology is really good at recognizing patterns and things like that. So credit card fraud is something that you bring up as an example of a great productivity enhancer that AI can provide.
Remember not so long ago when you needed to tell your credit card company that you're traveling overseas?
Like 5 years ago.
Yeah, like 5 years ago. Now, look, we get red flag warnings from our credit card company. This doesn't seem to be within your pattern of purchasing. This is all.
What are you talking about? I love Miley Cyrus. Of course, yes, I paid for that out.
Yeah. Now, the great part is that all the complex cybersecurity protocols out there, I get a new credit card number thrown to my phone for a tap pay in the matter of minutes, if not an hour or less.
Right.
So, there is an enormous amount of greater good and background AI and pattern recognition that does really interesting, applications of meticulousness at scale. So AI can do an enormous amount of personalized decision making, but at the end of the day, when you get, have a fraud alert that appears, do you want to call a call center that's all automated to step you through this, or do you want an individual on the other side saying, "Hey, that's okay, Paul. We can work through this. We'll have a new number to you in a few hours. We will FedEx a new card to you," and so forth. That personal experience needs to kick in. Much like we could automate diagnosis in the clinic, but it's the fact that the human connection that gets us through a lot of the complex pieces. Now we can automate that. We can amplify that, providing the decision support tools. So it makes it much easier. Hey, your credit card is going to be shipped today. It will be with you by 2:00 tomorrow afternoon. That just brings greater confidence to the consumer and efficiencies to the business angles.
Okay, I came from the world of advertising sales, so I called on ad agencies, specifically media planning agencies, and they employ hundreds or thousands of young 24 or 22 to 26-year-old new college graduates who are basically spreadsheet jockeys. What happens to their jobs?
So you're going to see more shifts in some of these menial activities where automation amplifies more, but leaving elements of this in the human judgment sphere. So I'll use the skip over to automated driving again for a moment here, because it's so easy. In a piece out this morning on LinkedIn that I ran into, you have an organization making a comparison between Uber services where you have one driver in each car doing lots of different things, from cleaning the seats to, filling the fuel or plugging in the charging system, to Waymo's, one individual per shift on average.
What happens
or
when somebody
more.
throws up in a Waymo at 2 o'clock in the
Exactly.
morning?
They're paying someone to clean that, or
Ugh.
they're paying tow truck operators to drive around San Francisco and close doors. So there are a lot of new roles that are going to be created here. So one of the old adage of AI that seems to be very true today is garbage in, garbage out. Is so if the algorithm is taking in poor data, it's going to give you a poor outcome at the end of the day. So a lot of these jobs will be reshifted in some way, shape, or form. Not all of them. There'll be new roles entirely created. So I look at a world where I think if we play our cards correctly, we can actually create new employment opportunities that alleviate the employment losses, all in creating a world that is better. Maybe if we're lucky, providing us a little more free time to do a little of what we want. Maybe in the perfect world, making the 35-hour work week more palatable.
Oh,
But anything less than that is not going to provide us enough, to provide the value proposition to create, grow, contribute, and all the important parts of work.
so in 1930, John Maynard Keynes predicted that technology would lead to a 15-hour work week within 100 years. That was 95 years ago, 96 years ago, I guess. Are we 4 years away from a significantly reduced work week?
No, I think we are in a world where we can see that as a potential outcome, but I don't think we're 4 years away from it. I think that, out in the distance, the context of getting a little more time to devote to the things that I'd really like to, pleasure, kids, family, society, may be realistic for many of us. Not everyone. Lots of service industry jobs that are going to stick around through this transformation. But I do think there is a world in which many of us could get a little free time back. But we need to remember that the human brain is a living organism that needs to do things to contribute to feel good about ourselves, to feel like we are contributing to society in unique ways. So I think there is a balancing point we're going to have to find. 15 hours seems a little short to find that value proposition.
Is AI the development phase that we're in of AI? Is it a toddler that is stumbling around? Is it an adolescent? Where is it in its growth trajectory?
That's a really nice analogy. I think we're more in that adolescent phase. But much like a young adolescent, there's a long way to go to the point of productivity. I think we are beyond the toddler phase, though. And I think that we need to really remember that we are not talking about a technology here. AI is a set of tools, many different algorithmic approaches. We look at large language models today as a leading technology shaping many of our decisions. But we can look at a number of trends, such as world language models or world models in particular, that may be coming next. But it's a big may. There's a lot of development here that needs to occur in how to optimize these systems, minimize the hallucinations, which are in essence building upon human hallucinations that build the training data that have saturated the web over the last 20 some odd years. So, humans hallucinate. Why wouldn't AI hallucinate? But I think the opinions AI will provide will continue to get better. But we need to remember that much of the time, these are opinions, much like you or I would develop. Just highly educated ones in most cases.
You made interesting points. The most significant breakthroughs don't arrive fully formed. They demand persistence. And you went on to say that early phases of technology, the potential utility is often obscured by novelty, by which you mean pornography, I think. And then you go on to make the point that the wheel, the most important invention in human history, or arguably, took thousands of years to be implemented in a way that it actually improved lives in a meaningful way. So, if we put technology or if we put AI in that through that lens, we should all just chill out.
And I think that chill out is a really interesting way of putting it. Is that
for an old guy from the 80s, right? That's a really
is that look? We need to. This technology is not going to solve everything overnight. Now. Do I hope organizations like Meta, Alphabet, OpenAI, Microsoft continue to evolve these technologies in ways that make sense for society? Yes. Do I think we should be looking at these through a pure corporate Revenue perspective, no. I think we need to be balancing that with the societal needs. I do think there are guardrails in data privacy, our ability to clearly understand where our data is being used, both in AI algorithm training as well as in within vehicles and many other attributes of life, that allow us to both contribute and not contribute when we so choose. Now let's go over to the healthcare side. HIPAA data privacy has been around for years. We saw during the COVID-19 pandemic that the Israelis who have a lot more liberty in using all of the health data were able to understand comorbidities and the state of the disease playing out in Israel more effectively than we were here in the US, where, for a lot of good reasons and a lot of not so good reasons, HHS can't just come in and mine all of our health data. So I think there are ways that we need to be considering donating our data, perhaps de-identified, to allow algorithms to help support us more effectively. And disease mitigation is a great illustration. Lots of people sick around the flu right now, but yet far too little data trying to summarize that to help us prevent, mitigate, and move forward.
For a non-technical audience, and thanks everybody for sticking around through a very interesting conversation, even if you're not a technologist, but how can the regular person use AI, and what should they be doing to stay on top of how AI can improve their lives?
So today, I think it's all about playing. Whether you're 10 years old or you're 85 years old, the tools that exist at our fingertips today, whether it's an app or a desktop icon, to go ask AI a question and then think about its reply, allows us to begin to start understanding what this electronic colleague, electronic friend can do to help support us. Write a love letter, write a business email, edit this story. Let's see what our electronic teammate provides to us.
Right.
When we look, and you mentioned the advertising world earlier, there is not much content left on social or in print or digital media that's not being optimized through AI for the readership. Whether that's good or bad, we can debate, but it is changing how information is shared. And for an average consumer, looking at how AI is the modern search engine, now that does change the advertising equation around, because many of us are just looking at the Google summaries as opposed to diving deeper. But that may be okay. We need to think that and recognize that, with a technology as powerful, or technology set as powerful as AI, that some of the skills that we held as bread and butter years ago are going to fall by the wayside. But we will create new reasoning skills as a result. We are creatures that learn over time. So if learning to speak the right prompts is the future, maybe the answer of typing using keyboards that were designed to slow down the process of communicating with a PC, it's time to move beyond that. So when we take this podcast episode and we digest this, sinking in and asking the chat bot a little bit to decipher this for me and my audience. If we're in business and we're leading an organization, it's empowering your teams to think forward and think out of the sandbox, learn faster than academia could ever imagine on how to implement tools in an organization. In essence, at times, unlearning things as fast as you're relearning them, because when we begin to think about starting small, scaling smart, and piloting AI in processes that we understand, we can find value propositions before pushing it out in mission critical roles and jumping off the cliff beyond what's recoverable.
Well, I've used ChatGPT and Claude and some of the others to, I use it all the time to edit my writing, and it's very good at that. It's not perfect, but it gives you lots of things to think about in ways to make an essay tighter, or reorder things, or provide a better structure to a sentence, reduce word count, find repetitive words, things like that. I asked ChatGPT to make a packing list for a golf trip I took to Scotland last year. What do I, and the more details you give it in the prompt, the better the packing list is going to be, right? I'm going to play 7 rounds of golf over 6 days. It's going to be wet, blah, blah, blah. But it knows that. What other things, what kind of quotidian things can people use ChatGPT to do to get their feet wet?
I'm looking to buy a new car. I'm looking to buy a microwave. I kind of like these types of food. What would you suggest? Trip planning, um, editing and honing letters to friends, um, developing research statements as a teenager. I know lots of folks right now that are using ChatGPT to be their tutors in college because college professors are not providing information quite as clearly as they need. So, okay, let's start asking the AI engines to teach us more effectively, because the AI engines can become more personalized in that information and can allow us to iterate back and forth. So when we want to learn, we want to do, we're looking at assistance that's electronic, almost instantaneous, and in the middle of the night. You started with, editing text. Well, we used to use communications teams for that all the time. Nothing new. Now we have an electronic communications team, whether it's ChatGPT, Claude, or Gemini, at 2 a.m. in the morning. When you need help planning for something, we could go to a human. We can go to an assistant. So, AI isn't magic here. It's just meticulousness at scale. And it is capable of doing lots of things for us. But we need to remember that most AI failures aren't really technical. They're human. It's our interpretation, our lack of imagination, that really makes what AI is today even more powerful.
Can AI create art?
It can definitely create art of a new form. Do I think that art is the same as a human-generated artistic creation? No. I think that it's different. It is based upon resemblance of what it was trained on in humans. So do we need to begin to label art, media, digital print as AI created? This is where guardrails are really something to think about. Am I okay with AI creating a rendition of a photograph or a picture or an artistic? Yeah, but that art piece I buy, I want to know that it's an AI generated something as opposed to some human artist. And I think that the consumer has a right to know that. Now, that's not much photography out there today that is not AI enhanced, but is that really truly art, or is that really just a repetition at scale of what humans were doing anyway? So where are these balancing points? And this is where we need some societal help as we really move through the phases of from, wow, oh my God, what can this do, to, whoa, I'm sure I want this, to growing this technology over time. So, really seeing the power of AI here, both in business, society, and life, is really observing what is it doing, what can it do, and building from there. Not worshiping the wave alone, thinking about what wave may come next.
It seems like AI hit an inflection point about a year ago where all of a sudden the quality of deepfakes and things like that just became so hard to differentiate from, quote, real things, that, it demonstrated that there will be inflection points, meaningful inflection points, or as you called them, oh shit moments in the future. What do you see the oh shit moments that we might encounter over the next couple of years?
I think one of those oh shit moments is going to be a resetting of the expectations of AI and the capitalist side. This is the AI bubble bursting.
Right.
I think many of us hope that's far in the distance beyond my retirement, but the reality is probably a little sooner.
Hey, man, don't say that. Don't say that. This ain't no metaverse.
Okay. Well, you got it right there. So I think the other is that we are going to become much more versed that some things are going to remain human for the foreseeable future. We're not going to automate away what we love to do. And that creativity side is something that we as humans are going to covet. So how do we amplify that? How do we stop, thinking about replacing it? So I think in the next several years, if not sooner, we're going to really begin to look at modern AI as an amplification as opposed to an automation tool. And I think as we move through the next decade or two, we'll worry a little more about the automation. What really keeps me up at night, though, is that going back to the China-U.S. Modern space race around AI, we need to get our checks and balances in gear here and set a direction and stick with it. Whether that direction is perfect or not almost doesn't matter. What is key is that we are not a pendulum moving back and forth, this administration light on regulation, the next administration heavy on regulation, making the capital investments much more risky over the long haul. And China, who I think is going to continue to dominate in the world's largest auto supplier, I think is going to set directions here that are hard to keep up with unless we pick a direction and move with it. And the perfect answer is not something that necessarily matters. A really good answer and sticking with it is probably the most important.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing ping-ponging back and forth on policy matters in other areas from administration to administration. So you can see how that would be problematic when it comes to AI.
Yeah. So I think the future here really doesn't belong to those who predict it. It doesn't belong to the technologies that we see coming out of Silicon Valley and the like. It belongs to those who really make it useful. Because the things that are useful, we're going to buy, we're going to consume, we're going to integrate into our daily lives. And it's all about utility.
So some of these things look like hype and some of these things look practical. We saw Elon with a big press conference around the Tesla Optimus. I guess that was last week or something. How long until I own my own Optimus robot, and how do I keep it away from my wife?
Probably longer than Elon wants to admit. So, look, there's lots of folks, and Elon's one of them, who are really good at predicting, long range future. I mean, Elon's been predicting full self-driving here for over a decade now. Do I think the Optimus robot is further out than that? Yeah, but the market's going to continue to reward Tesla as a technology company here as long as that feels like it's a handshake away. So I think we need to begin to provide much more scrutiny to the value propositions and the reality as opposed to the hype. And as soon as we do that, we're going to begin to reward the companies that are delivering on useful technology, and begin to penalize the companies that are hyping a future that may be realistic, but is just too far out there to matter.
We started the conversation talking about the trajectory of technologies, and driving is one of those, and the technologies that became a thing within our lifetime. The fact that we can sit in a Waymo and eat a snack while it drives us someplace is mind-blowing. It would have been incomprehensible to our 12-year-old selves, right? So what's going to happen? Like how long, and this is also your area of expertise. So let's finish by talking about autonomous driving. How long until humans aren't driving cars anymore?
Not something I want to worry about in my lifetime. It is way out there. So there are aspects of the operational environment, maybe it's Barrow, Alaska, maybe it's the Antarctic, where we will always drive. The cost of automating that would be insurmountable. I think we are going to see more and more driver assistance taking a greater role in supporting us. I think it's a bigger question whether highly automated mobility companies like Waymo succeed in this round, or the growth there kind of comes to a halt only to be surpassed later on by a new technology that is much more economical. The reason for that is it's not the technology. The technology and the wow of this technology is really cool. I mean, it is amazing to see what the team at Waymo, Aurora Trucks, and other automation providers are doing. But is the business case there fast enough to continue to demand this kind of capital allocation? And I fundamentally question that. I think that we are looking at organizations that have decades of growth to the black. And do we continue to invest over that long path? Is an open question. I think there are a number of reasons that you see so much growth from Waymo. I think they got to get the valuation up. I think the context of an IPO is essential. Alphabet's got to get some of this risk off its books. Many early employees that Waymo are desperate to get out and see some personal retirement funds.
Yes.
So I think there is a lot of economics pushing what's going on right now. But every robotaxi Waymo expands with is costing more than the alternative Uber And where is that inflection point truly? I'm sure it lies somewhere between never and whatever the mathematicians at Waymo are suggesting to the investors today, which is probably a little optimistic.
Well, it's fun to think about, and it's wild to look back and see what's already happened within our lifetimes. And thanks for writing the book and for sharing some insights into this complicated but fascinating area. The book is called How to Make AI Useful. My guest is Bryan Reimer. Bryan, thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me.
That was fun with Bryan Reimer. It's freezing in New York City, so after the interview, I decided to walk down the street and get some Cuban food, and I just ate it, and it's delicious. So if I fall asleep in the middle of doing these takeaways, it happens. All right, here they are. Number one, AI, it's happening. Like, you're not going to stop it, right? And so you might as well get on board. If I were 22, or if I were talking to my son or daughter who will be 22 in a few years, this would be the area I'd be like, just go get as smart as you absolutely can about this industry. And the associated industries, what are they? They're like crypto. We talked about power. There's a massive growth coming in power generation. So utilities and nuclear and all that kind of stuff. You can't be smart enough about these things. Tell the young folks to get involved and get smart at it, because that's where you make lifetime money, is being early in a field. Not that I'm going to go back into AI or into the marketing using AI, because that would require work. That would require hard work, and I'd rather just do this, which I enjoy much more. Okay, number two, consistency in our politics from administration to administration matters. There are costs that we pay for the ping-ponging back of treaties that we sign and then revoke or leave or whatever. I'm not making a judgment on any specific one. I'm just saying there are costs to the lack of consistency. And I think in this one, it's a very concrete example of how the extremity of our politics is not a good thing, and that we need to start pulling things a little back into the middle. You don't have to read the news for 5 seconds to read about stuff that is going crazy on both sides of the political aisle. I've talked about this more than I want to, but here's an example of where, you know what, let's pick a 20-year strategy, if not 50-year strategy for AI, and try to stick to it in a way that's good for America. Perhaps the penalty we pay for our democracy is that the definition of what's good for America is not something we all agree to. What are you going to do? All right, number three, takeaways. Oh, hey, thanks to listener Charlie Henry for sending Bryan to me. Bryan reached out to me on LinkedIn, and I had been thinking about AI. I'd been wondering who I should talk to about AI. And here was Bryan landing in my inbox on LinkedIn. So if you've got great ideas for some guests, send them my way. I'm easily discoverable on LinkedIn and in the socials. That's a great way to do it. I will consider whoever comes my way. That doesn't mean I will say yes to everybody. In the case of Bryan, it just happened to be something I was interested in when the phone rang, as it were. Hey, thanks for listening all the way to the end. Like Charlie, please share the good news of Reasonably Happy with your friends and spread the good news. Thanks for showing up. See you next time.